It's New York Homicide, the series on Oxygen True Crime, exploring some of the city's haunting murders, like in July 2020, a few months into the pandemic, and it's a vicious crime.
It's incredible because it happens in Lower Manhattan, a gentrified area. This individual is really attacked in his office, brutally beaten and stabbed to death.
Tech entrepreneur and CEO Fahim Saleh murdered inside his Soho apartment.
And detectives have nothing. They have a shadowy picture from outside. But they have, when he did something, they saw the pins in him from a stun gun, and they went from there.
The Saleh case, one of the latest featured on the show, hosted by former NYPD Chief of Detectives Robert Boyce, that also highlights the efforts of detectives to solve the kidnapping and murder of Staten Island native Megan Marotte.
You can tell almost immediately that, wait a second, she's gone, not of her own volition, it can't be. All of a sudden she just disappears. This is a bad one.
My conversation with Boyce highlighting the police work cracking these cases, while also taking a look back at his own career spanning decades, beginning back in 1983, when he was a beat cop on the Upper West Side.
In '83, it was a completely different city, obviously, than it is now. So things were fast and loose. We carried .38s and we wore light blue shirts, and it was just a different world. And then all of a sudden, mid-'80s, later on mid-'80s, crack hit and changed everything. With that, I immediately went to narcotics division in Manhattan South and started working those.
And when you say crack hit, you mean the crack epidemic happened, and then all of a sudden you're starting to see desperate people committing these crimes and drug dealers and hitting other drug dealers. I mean, is that sort of what's happening? How does that overwhelm the department?
Dan, it seemed like it happened overnight. I mean, I was in a street narcotics unit, which means in a precinct. And when we first saw crack, we didn't know what it was. It was a little while. And it was, we were like, what's this? But clearly it was a narcotics transaction. And you had to cut the product to really test it. So that's what they did, and all of a sudden it swept the city. It became an intoxicant, not just like cocaine is a relaxing drug or whatever it is. It changed everything. Created people who were so driven to it, so addicted to it, to commit crime and violence. And it spawned all these groups, these criminal organizations that we got involved in.
We're talking about 1,600 homicides a year. I mean, more than one or two a day. I mean, depending on that. That might have been a good year back during that time.
Well, I think that was '93, the highest year we had. And the year after that, I was in the 7-5 squad in East New York, Brooklyn. And so that was the epicenter. That's where the most homicides happened. I think we had 140 in 1 year. And to tell the story in totality, when I left, which I'm enormously proud of, I worked to my last day. I couldn't work another day. Once you turn 63, you got to get out. Yeah. And I did. And at that point, when I looked back at the 7-3 and 7-5, those two commands I worked to almost exclusively in the 90s. There was 200 homicides in 93, and when I left, it was 20. So it was 10% of what it was.
Amazing.
It shows you, it's a great diagram what happened to the city in that short amount of time.
And you eventually work your way up chief of detectives and also involved with the gang units and things along those lines. I mean, we talk about some of those crime reductions. A lot of things went into it, not just from you, but obviously from all over through the department. But what do you think is one of the biggest differences that the way the policing sort of evolved?
Well, CompStat was the issue there. CompStat was the arena that you made your career in, and that you were able to bring these organic ideas that you got from your precinct, share it with others, and they adapted the same, and then everybody went with it. But at that time, when we first started CompStat, nobody was really mapping crime and showing it to us. We did that by ourselves with thumbtacks on a map.
Wow.
So you look at it now, and it's completely generated. Great data systems the NYPD has, and where we were back then. Additionally, if you wanted to get a criminal report on someone you were looking at in an investigation, you would have to go down to headquarters, go to two different units, the photo unit downstairs, and then go up to, I think it was BCI at the time it was called, Bureau of Crime Index, and wait for that to come out of an old computer. Take it back, and then look at it. Now everything's done on your phone.
You can see why some of those cases maybe went on forever or didn't get solved a lot of the times.
Exactly. Well, slowed down.
Yep.
And all of a sudden there's that crush of cases. So when you see these detectives in the NYPD, a horrible incident that happens, and the next night you see the person being taken out of the precinct, that's because of the technology we have now.
And
great police work too, I got to say that.
Of course, and obviously there are so many different cases that you've been a part of, you've overseen, your detectives have worked on. When you left, you said one of the cases that stuck with you was the case of Karina Vetrano,
Yes.
A jogger out there. Can you talk a little bit about that case and sort of how it got solved?
Sure. So ironically, it was National Night Out, which is a big thing in August, the first Tuesday in August, and we all go there. And I was there making my stops on the way home at different locations. And I got the call that this girl was missing in the park, and we were looking for her at that point. And so, terrible thing, she went for a jog. She usually ran with her father. And for a reason, her father was hurt. He had a bad back. He didn't run, and I think that guilt stays with Phil, and he really shouldn't. And she was attacked, brutally beaten, and we believe was attempted sexual assault. Karina fought for her life, and in doing so, she lost her life, but also she identified the perpetrator.
And this is a case that shocked the city when it happened. And
Shocked-
this was a young, beautiful woman out for a jog, assaulted and killed. I mean, that's sort of the worst of the worst when you think about.
And
some
I
of
was
the
getting calls
possibilities.
from London because it went through CNN and out to the world, in airports and all kinds of things. I was getting called from the London police, and where are you in the case? And I was using that because we had a profile of the killer onto her fingernails. We had a DNA profile, and he wasn't in the system. And we knew it was a male, but we didn't know, where he'd never been arrested before, or was never put in the system anyway. So therein lies the issue, is finding that person, that needle in a haystack.
And how did they find him?
Well, I tell you, one of my lieutenants who worked for me right outside my door, great man John Russo, lived in Howard Beach, and he remembers stopping someone 2 months before it happened, who was looking in backyards, acting in a furtive manner, and stopped him and just said, "Police, just ID him." So John said, call me up and said, "Listen, why don't we take a look at this guy?" Because we were doing everything.
That's sort of that ground level police work right there.
It is. And everybody getting involved, which was important. Not only the detective squads and the precincts, but also in headquarters where we were sitting. John said, "Let's go take a look at this guy." And we did. We sent someone over and to get his DNA, and he gave it. And when he came back, they said, well, I called the sergeant. I said, what's your feeling on this? And he says, "I don't think it's him." I said, "Why?" I said, he goes, "Because he's a nerd, he's weird, he lives in the basement of a house, he's like a loner." And he said, he has no friends. I said, "Well, you just described a serial murderer to me, by the way. So we're gonna check this DNA anyway." And then we got the hit. And then it all fell into place because we got his phone triangulated to that park at that time. He had made a full confession to us. So that was 6 months exactly 6 months after the crime.
It's interesting. That's sort of a dual aspect there, where you have that good, hard police work of remembering something, going on and stopping someone, and bringing the technology together. I mean, it's sort of all wrapped into one there.
It really does, because you have to look at everything that comes up in the case. You can't say, you have to go look at it. You can't stop.
A memorable case for you, and also one of the cases that has been featured on New York Homicide on Oxygen, the True Crime Network. Talk to me a little bit about this show. I mean, this show came together after you left the force, but
it did. Commissioner Bill Braden at the time was approached by Hollywood and said, would we consider doing a show on crime in New York? And he deferred to me. He says, talk to Bob Boyce, and they called me. And it was a time when it was after the Floyd incident,
George Floyd,
and law enforcement was getting a really bad look at that point, just distrust and changing laws and reforming stuff, that doesn't make any sense, all kinds of things. So I said, well, that's not us. We don't like that. We help people. So I said, yeah, sure, we'll go forward with the show. And we went out to Hollywood, myself and my wife, and we sold it. My wife is a retired detective.
And this case really does focus on the detectives and the families, but the detectives and some of the work that they do in really losing themselves in trying to solve these horrific crimes often. It seems like you're really on top of that.
It's fun to talk to them again as well, because it's funny, Dan, because when you talk to them about the case, you do your research and you remember it. Some, not all those cases I worked on personally, quite a few of them I have, but not all of them. We went back to one case in 1980, the murder at the Met.
Yes, I remember that case, yes.
And we finally got a detective who worked the case, and he was a great guy, and he explained the whole thing to us. And they didn't have anything we have now today. No cameras, no technology, but they did have a fingerprint, and they did have a sketch artist. That's what they wanted, and the rest of the thing they strategized.
Want to draw
And
your
funny thing, just to follow that, the detective who had the case, 2 months later, catches the John Lennon murder.
Oh, really? Wow.
Crazy.
And so many high-profile cases in the city. You never know what's going to happen day in and day out. And one of the cases that really got a lot of attention on this show, but It's called The Masked Assassin, and it's the murder of tech entrepreneur Fahim Saleh. Tell me a little bit about the details of this case.
Well, again, it's my last show of the year. It's incredible because it happens in Lower Manhattan, a gentrified area, which is Lower East Side, which was not gentrified when I came on, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So this individual is really attacked in his office, brutally beaten and stabbed to death. And detectives have nothing. They have a shadowy picture from outside, but they have, when he did something, they saw the pins in him from a stun gun, and they went from there. Without giving too much away, they were able to piece together information that I had never heard of before. And I was retired at the time, but my friends had the case. And I was calling them and asking them. They said, "You really got to take a look at this case. It's amazing how they put this all together."
And just going through some of the details here, if we can. Obviously, the episode's coming up. We want people to watch. But some of the details that we do know. I mean, this was a younger guy, 33 years old, comes back to his condo, the Lower East Side, and he's in an elevator, and you can see the individual with him in the elevator. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, to see some of the situations that are sort of unfolding here as it happens.
It's a great observation you make, because that's how you pivot into something. He knew this person. And so that changes your outside world. It's not a stranger. He knew this person, was fairly comfortable with this person. So that changed. So now your pivot goes to there when you're thinking, when you're strategizing your case, when you're thinking about where you're going to go. Wait, he knew that guy. So that's someone in his world. Now we can shut up all the outside stuff and go right into his lifestyle.
And this is someone who family members became worried about him. They go to his condo, and it is a gruesome scene.
Yes.
Decapitated, dismembered. In generalities, when an officer comes upon that scene, or a detective, what are some of the first things that they are generally going to start to look at?
Well, first thing, you protect the integrity of the crime scene, because any little thing there can help you with your case. Now, how small? In this case, it was really small. So sometimes that's what's not only what you see, it's what you don't see, what's missing here, all right, and what should be here and it's not here. So you look at that and you really detach yourself in a professional way from the crime scene, and you go about your business. I owe a lot to the crime scene unit in this city, because they solve some of my big cases. So that's really important. Understand the video downstairs. You immediately go into video mode on a canvas and see what you can find. So you want that individual who you see, who you like, dressed in the dark clothing, and now you not only look video-wise when he ran off, during and went off, but what happens beforehand. Now, we had a case in Manhattan, murder of a business CEO, Brian Thompson. It's not only that when you get to the scene, you see the video, he's there, you track him back, and you see he's in a coffee shop and what he buys. And now you look for that, what he bought, a bottle of water in a bar, and you find the wrappers on the street. Now you got DNA. It's not going to help you solve the case, but when you do find him, it'll pull him right to that scene. And that's what's important. They got DNA off both things.
And in that particular case, that's the Luigi Mangione case. That's down there and still sort of moving through the court system. It was important, just like in this masked assassin case, to find those little pieces of video, just a snippet. And sometimes they just need a second, because in that case, it was 1 second where Mangione takes his mask off that then sort of helped put the picture out there, which eventually led to his arrest.
You're right, Dan. You want to capture that moment. And we have a lot of cameras in New York City. Not everywhere, but just about everywhere in Manhattan. And so if you commit a crime here, you're really under the gun. We're going to find something, some digital evidence that we can find to use in the case.
And just before we move on from the masked assassin case, which is going to be one of the next episodes on New York Homicide, when you have a dismembered body, and you have this what appears to be just it's not a random situation. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like that's more of a personal thing. It seems like that's maybe somebody who knew them. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a burglary. I mean, what are some of the immediate things that
it could be immediate rage too, and you have to understand that. Generally speaking, if the body has been dismembered, disarticulated in any way, you look for the cuts, and exactly if that reveals anything to you. And then that person had to have time to do that. So where did it happen? Probably didn't happen at the scene where you find the body. So you have to figure out where in fact that person did, and did he plan, or did she plan it out? It's usually he. And so it's a cold-blooded murder. It means you had planning, not a hot blood that happens in a moment. It's cold-blooded. Now you have less mistakes generally by the perpetrator, but mistakes nonetheless. And you have to find those. Find the mistakes, turn them into evidence, and lock the guy up.
And it's those sort of little pieces that the detectives on the show are able to talk about, and they're able to recount. And often, to be honest, sometimes it's hard to track down these detectives to talk about these cases, but it seems like they're willing, in this case, to really let people in and let people inside and how they solve these cases.
Dan, it's a great point, because I'll call them. I personally call them. My wife does. She knows a lot of them because she was up here. So, and she's been on the show too. She worked these cases. So you call them, and most want to come back on because they're proud of their work thing. Some others don't want to because they don't want to open that door again. For whatever, or they don't want to go on TV. And these are people who are really tough and rugged, mentally strong people. They just some want to do it and show, this is what we do. This is how I spent my life, and I helped the city get these crime reductions, and this is what I did. And there's some of the ones who say, no thanks, no thanks.
And you say you don't want to open the door. What do you mean by that?
Well, you lived and you saw these things. Now you no longer do. You're walking on beaches, you're playing golf when you retire, and all of a sudden you go back to that time where you didn't sleep for 3 or 4 days. You lived in the same suit. You did all these things. You weren't eating correctly, and that's how you solve cases, through vigilance and breaks and evidence.
And you sort of lose yourself inside some of those
cases. You do,
sometimes.
And you don't come out, and that's why it's many a time you grab 3 hours sleep, you're up and at it again. It's what it is.
One of the next cases, last sightings at the deli. Young pregnant woman from Staten Island.
Yeah. We had 3 Staten Island cases, all young ladies, and it's just a tragedy in every way. They're trying to figure out what's going on in her life that could have caused this. Who did she know? And the pregnancy is a big tip. And you got to run that down. That's the whole thing. It was a tragic case, and Staten Island is. We try to hit every borough in the city, and we do. We hit every borough because it's important to show the neighborhoods of New York. This is an immigrant city, and so that sometimes that's relative in the case, and that's where we get our accents from too. And people say a lot about the show. You detectives, the Brooklyn guys are different than the Bronx guys. Yeah, they're not actors.
You could tell it's a New York show.
But the actors actually, they try to be like us because we wear suits and ties.
That's true. And that's the
thing.
iconic badge.
Yes.
In this case, Megan Marotte.
Correct.
August 4th, 2013, last seen near the 511 Deli and Grocery, Port Richmond Avenue. August 7th, her brother reports her missing. And then August 15th, 2 women walking their dog discovered her decomposed body in Willowbrook Park. When detectives come upon a scene like that, they secure the crime scene. What then do they have to try and figure out?
At that point, you look at your missings first, because we get a lot of missing cases in the city. And a lot of my episodes are on missing cases and how they evolve into homicides. And you can tell almost immediately that, wait a second, she's gone not of her own volition. It can't be. All of a sudden, she just disappears. This is a bad one. And it happened, but we have another case in Staten Island we did this year, the same thing. Where did this lady go? So and so now you have to walk it back. It's going towards a homicide, and you treat it as such. And when you find the remains of this lady, you walk back and everything about it, and you try to figure things out, what happened.
So from the 4th to the 15th, that's 11 days. How does it complicate the investigation to have a body that's decomposed to that amount over that period of time?
It's difficult, but then again, that type of decomposition is not impossible to work with. You can work with that. There are remains that we find in skeletal remains that are really difficult to determine the cause of death. So in this we were able to do that and move forward, and you can kind of figure out who the person is, and you have an identified body. That really increases your chance to solve the crime.
This case, she was someone who was mixed up at some point with drugs. She'd had some problems with the law itself. But as an investigator, that doesn't factor into trying to solve the case. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are or what your background is. You sort of get that from when you watch a show like this, that it doesn't matter who they are. These detectives think that it's a case that deserves to be solved. Every life has
it absolutely does. And unfortunately, you'll hear people on social media say, well, this case is getting all the attention, so they're not working that. That's not true. And the closings is just an aside. People would think all the cases in Manhattan get solved immediately. They don't. It takes a lot of work. And the most successful cases like Bronx Homicide solves just about all the cases every year. They have the highest rate in the city, and that's one of the poorest areas of the city. So that old adage that, you know, the media solves a case, it helps, but it doesn't solve the case. Hardcore detective work does.
As you look out on the city now, from the time that you left, which wasn't all that long ago, just a couple years ago, 2018 is when you retired. Here we have 2025. Are you feeling good about where things are at in the city right now? What are your concerns?
I am, and I'm happy with the Detective Bureau, and that's my main concern, because it's the second largest bureau in the city, and Detective Joe Kenny's tremendous, the chief of detectives, does a great job, and we're friends, we talk. So I'm always proud when I see something. I'm not surprised when they make these arrests on big cases. No, I'm really not.
What are your concerns right now, just in terms of maybe the way the police department is viewed or seen? I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I look at the crime stats every couple of weeks, and they had a great first quarter this year. We have to get back to 2019, which is the barometer of how we should look at things, because that's pre-COVID, and get back to those numbers. Because in doing pre-Floyd, pre-COVID, all these things, how come we were doing so much better then? They're getting close to getting back to that now. And when you're chief of detectives, you want to bring something wholly different to you want to carry that ball down the field from the last guy who had it. And so that's the way I looked at it. So in that round, we opened a lot of federal task forces that helped us solve a lot of these crimes, helped us bring down gang crime tremendously. Cyber crime, human trafficking, you name it, gun investigations. Those task forces bring a whole nother aspect to your investigations. Now you have their databases and their abilities combined with yours.
New York Homicide is one of those shows where you're getting to see things that there's a lot of true crime shows that are out there.
Yes.
And you can sort of find it on any network, anywhere you want. But this show really gives you just sort of the feeling that you get from these detectives often. And just you can see how much they care about these cases.
They really do. They're invested in them from day one. And we were talking earlier, you lose your life for a couple of weeks, at least a couple of days until you make that arrest. You're not going to your kids' ball games. You're not really eating right. You're not going home all the time. You're sleeping in the station house because you understand that all evidence is fleeting. And if you don't get it in that first 48, 72 hours, you're not getting it. Because especially the video evidence. And a lot of the shows, the initial show, Joe Comey, when he was murdered, if we didn't get that video immediately, it would have put us in a tough spot in solving that case. But we did, because that's when you just, all right, call home, I'm not coming home tonight, I'm on a case, and you work it as hard as you can. And sometimes that evidence sits in that case file, all your hard work does, and years later you can solve the crime. We just had a case, actually the homicide happened not far from here, on 47th Street. We had a diamond dealer shot in the head and executed outside. And we got the perpetrator fairly quickly, but we didn't get all the perpetrators. And that took years later, and the federal aid with the feds in making that happen. So you never give up on anything. Even though you make the initial arrest, he refuses to cooperate. You have the gun, you have a lot on the case, but you don't have everybody. So you just keep working and working and working. And it turns out in this particular case, we were able to get the person behind murder. And
you still say we. I know you're retired, but you still say we because it's still with you.
It is still with us, and it's a joint effort. No one single person solves a crime. It's that first sector on the scene, which I've been, how you save that crime scene. Everybody goes into not the one person who solves the crime. Everybody's part of it. So yeah, I'll always be NYPD. That's to answer your question.
Chief Boyce, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.